once again, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's H-1B grant reporting for WIPS compliance webinar. We're going to focus on WIPS compliance and H-1B grant reporting for the Closing the Skills Gap grant. My name is Susan Harden, and I'm with AGS. This session today is being recorded, so it will be available to view on demand or to share with your colleagues afterwards, should you want to. So let's go ahead and dive in. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. I know you all have very busy schedules. It's summertime, and we have grants to write and reporting to focus on. We're just about at that quarter time to be running reports to the feds or for your other grants that you're running. So thank you very much for being here. A little bit about AGS, American Government Services, that is to say. We are federal grant specialists, been working for over 23 years in the workforce industry. We support hundreds of organizations around the country or for H-1B grants from Tech Hire, America's Promise, SWIFFY, One Workforce, Rural Healthcare, Closing the Skills Gap, Scaling Apprenticeship, and have upcoming templates for the Apprenticeship Building America and the Good Jobs Challenge out of EDA. So lots of organizations that we support and lots of different types of grants and pre-built templates that we provide to our customers. We really set ourselves apart in the industry by being both H-1B experts and by providing a very high-tech and high-touch approach to our customer service. We provide personalized one-on-one training for all of our grant administrators and monthly grant webinars to continue to provide a community of support around not just AGS Prime, but providing you with updates to the application as relates to the changes that the feds make, and the feds make changes all the time. We keep your applications up to date with those federal changes and communicate on a monthly basis as part of your customer service package. A variety of organizations nationwide use our products for both these pre-built templates for grants as well as the AGS Prime no-code platform, where our customers can build their own applications for whatever grants or projects that they need data management for, separate from some of these heavily compliant grants that we do support out of DOL, ETA, and EDA. So that's just a little bit about us. So we say, leave grant compliance to us, because we really are H-1B subject matter experts. We'll provide you the compliant participant tracking platform or data management solution, and we keep the system up to date for both data inputting and reporting. And all you have to do is make sure that your data gets into the system. So, pretty good partnership. So in today's session, I'm going to show you how to auto-generate your CSV file for WIPS by, literally clicking the button that produces a compliant data specification per your WIPS report that complies with recent Perl revisions. We're then going to switch gears and I'll show you how to track that data. What does it look like going into the system, so you can really see what that template looks like as a case management, data management environment, humans helping humans. Let's get rid of the spreadsheets and let's use a logical process for case management to track this data, but tracking it while at the same time tracking compliant data with the rules on fields and forms baked into the application, if you will, so that your data entry staff from your organization, from your state, from around the country, depending upon, the size of your project, they don't have to have those business rules memorized. They're built right into the application, and the application guides your data entry folks right through that data entry process. So the data going in is correct. Therefore, you get to press that magic button to produce the WIPS file, which I'll show you. We'll spend a couple of minutes looking at some of the other, performance outcome measures reports that we include in the system, just so you can see the other kinds of report capabilities that are built into this pre-built application. And then, of course, as part of this process, midway through the second half, that is to say, of your grant project, you've got existing data, and you're using some kind of a system, whether it's paper and pencil or Excel spreadsheets or, some other product that just isn't doing it for you. One of the things that we provide to our new customers at this point in your process is we'll take your most recent validated WIPS file and use that as the baseline for importing your existing data. So you can start this product and project with your system, your application, pre-populated with current data. So I'm not going to import your data obviously today, but I'm going to show you what that interface looks like so you can see what we do behind the scenes for you and be able to make that happen fairly quickly and easily and take that burden off your plate. If this is the transition that you're thinking about making at this point, we want to make it as easy as possible. So at this point then, let's dive into the demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and toggle over to my demo site for H-1B and show you those key attributes that we've discussed. Let me go ahead and dive over here. Oops. And here's my application. Let me go to my home module. So here's my demo site for H-1B, both closing the skills gap and scaling apprenticeship. This is what our customers' applications look like, although this is my demo site. So there's no real data here. And just as an aside, all of our customers are hosted in Amazon Web Services, or AWS. And all of our customers have their own dedicated virtualized web server. So everyone has their own domain name and their own, of course, therefore, dedicated IP address. So there is no commingling of data. So we are what's considered, AGS Prime is considered a single tenant environment. So if you're writing notes, make sure you write that down. We are a single tenant environment. It's a known term in the industry. Not to pick on Salesforce, but they're just a very well-known product. Obviously, everyone's heard of Salesforce. They are what's considered a multi-tenant environment. So our data, for those of us who use Salesforce, our data is really all in one very large database, right? And we only see our database and our login credentials and the security protocols in Salesforce. We have always handled this differently because we're dealing with PII. And very sensitive data where we have organizations, again, either a single organization in a single state perhaps, or organizations all over the country that are working on behalf of your project, but your data must remain segregated from the rest of our customers, right? So we are a single tenant environment. Everybody's hosted on Amazon Web Services, or AWS. And the security protocols built into the architecture of Prime make it so that each of your individual partner organizations, should you have more than one, which we typically see, whether it's again a couple of schools or organizations or a consortium from all over the country, every organization in your project will log in and only see their organization's data, even though they're part of your larger project. You as an administrator if those of you who are on this call are going to be considered application or grant administrators, you will log in and you will always see all of the data from all of your partner organizations for both oversight and reporting. But your partner organizations, from a security perspective, will log in and they will only ever see their organization's data. That's just baked into the architecture of Prime for these grants. Again, we've been supporting these kinds of grants for years and know that that is just an absolute, mic drop requirement that kind of organizational security be required. Of course, there are other security protocols and user roles built into the application for you to decide what your users are allowed to see or not see, or do or not do, as the case may be. I've logged into my demo site, back to this, and I'm an administrator. So I see all of the menu items, the modules, that is to say, across the top, including my administrative module, where we give the local administrators for this grant in this application, some tweaking and tuning and controls specific to your grant. Remember, this is a pre-built template that has all the business rules and all the Perl data elements, plus a few other things, added, already baked into it for logical case management, business data entry, and business processes. But again, we've been managing these kinds of grants for so long, we know there is just inherently other types of information that you're going to want to collect. So when we look at participants, for example, and then we look at our profile, we know that there are required fields that the feds require, right? All these asterisks and the help text built in to all of these Perl data elements. But we also know that there's going to be some additional information that you're going to want to keep track of for your own follow-up purposes that may have nothing to do with the grant. So you'll see throughout this template that all the Perl data elements are here, plus a few other things that we just know are pretty standard across the board. Within the admin module, then, for those of you who are going to be administrators, we allow you to add your own keyword values and with these catalogs so that your grant in Alabama, for example, might have some very different goals or demographics, even some different attributes than perhaps a project in Washington State. So while it's a compliant template and we don't allow you to configure yourself out of compliance, we do give you the ability to modify some keywords and some catalogs here and there that are specific to your grant. ONET codes, for example, are very specific for your project. So we want to make sure that you're able to do that kind of buffing and polishing. So that's what we see here in our modules. Let me start as promised. I'm going to jump over to reports, and I'm going to go ahead and run the first report, the first among equals, right? The reason why everybody looks for these kinds of applications is the WIPS report. I'm going to go ahead and run this WIPS file. I'm just going to select my H-1B grant. Remember, this is my demo site. And I'm going to say for quarter 2, because it's going to be the quarter you're going to be running for. I'm going to say yes, ignore the error file for now, although we do give you the ability to run, before you submit anything to the feds, a last data validation report for error checking, just in case somebody copied and pasted something in or there's something weird that went on. We want to make sure that before you send anything off to the feds, that you've done one last run through of your WIPS file just for one final error checking. So this is going to run for a couple of seconds. It's done. Let me open this up. Again, this is my demo site. My CSV file opens natively in Excel. And for those of you who are familiar with running WIPS reports, this should look pretty familiar to you. We have all of our columns. We know Excel strips out leading zeros, so my aliasing might look a little bit different from what you would actually submit to the feds. But otherwise, it's all of the 90 columns of data that we expect to see in our WIPS file. So we produced that for you, and you can now have that saved on your desktop and then toggle over to the feds, upload your report. And if everything comes back appropriately and you're going to be able to validate that file, then you can run your own QPR out of this application anytime you want to, so that your AGS Prime QPR is your heads up for what you're going to be receiving back from the Fed. So you always know what your QPR from the feds is going to look like before you have to wait for the QPR coming back from the feds after you have validated your file. And of course, we want you to compare the prime QPR, as this opens here, to whatever the feds send you back after you have validated your WIPS file, just to make sure that all of our numbers match their numbers. You can see that this looks exactly like the federal layout for your QPR. So we are reproducing this for you, just giving you the ability as grant project managers to run this report whenever you want to. So what is the first rule of good project management? Eliminate surprises, right? So we always want to make sure that you can run your reports. It's your data. Run your reports whenever you want to and know where you are compared to where you think you are compared to where you're supposed to be, or where you think you're supposed to be anyway. So that's just a couple of quick reports there. I'm going to jump over here back to my participant management just for a moment, and we'll pick once again on Alexia Abrams. I'm going to open up her case folder. This is an existing participant. So we saw her profile before, her demographic data. We've enrolled her in a program. The program record in Prime as this pre-formatted, pre-built form with all of the data elements for the Pearl organized in this logical case management process, including the help text that comes directly from the Pearl for all of these fields, right? As I scroll down this form, my save button is not live when I open up this form because I have some required fields here. So I'm going to go ahead and we have these required fields because this person is a recipient of incumbent worker training and they have completed their training program. We know that because we filled in that they completed their training program, right, through these two fields. And we know up here that they are a recipient of incumbent worker training. If neither one of those values were selected, then these values would not be required. So again, just an example of the baked-in business logic. I'll show you some others up here under program characteristics. If I say that this person is unemployed, right, we now have additional messages on the screen, error messages, if you will, that if this person is employed, the recipient of incumbent worker training must equal no. So they cannot have both of these values on these fields in concert, or you will get error messages. We also cannot say that we are employed and yes, long-term unemployed. So these are the kinds of, basic business rules, of which there are hundreds in this grant that are written into this application, that your end users do not have to have memorized. I mean, it's almost impossible to memorize all of the business rules associated with this. So we guide your data entry process, your people through this process. If I say here, for example, yes, they have retained their current position. If that's the case, then we know that their advancement for first, second, and third quarter after completion all must be no. So when I select no for all of those, that on-screen message goes away. I've satisfied the business rules and my save button is now live. So we don't allow your data entry staff to save records that the data is not correct. We're going to keep track of services. Your services catalog is completely up to you to enter. You can put costs of services should you want to. Go back to this person's case folder. You can see they have services for which we have identified costs. You have totals built right into the view here, so we can know kind of where we are in terms of services. This is a very, very popular feature. Even though costs is not something you have to report to the feds, this is a pretty important attribute for this project as you are keeping track of information. Other types of information that you're able to keep track of course, are assessments and all of the trainings and the credentials, measurable skills gains, pre-apprentice work experience if you're working with pre-apprentices, apprenticeships and that employment, as well as case notes and attachments. As many documents as you want per participant in this application. So that's just kind of a quick look at some of the features of the data entry process. So you can kind of see what the forms look like. Again, we guide the data entry process through these forms, and what I think is a fairly obvious and intuitively named set of forms to support your data entry process. I want to jump back to reports one moment and look at another report that is very, very popular, which is the H-1B real-time performance outcome measures. This report is based on the goals that you put into your, I think it was Appendix D, perhaps, for when you said, here's what we're going to accomplish throughout our grant per year, per individual line item goal. And this report produces a very complex spreadsheet based on your goals and based on your actual data, so that you, again, as grant managers and project managers, always know where you stand based on your goals and your actuals. I will tell you that, so here's your projected, here's your actuals, and here's your percent to goal for year one, for all of those, all of A's and all of B's, you know, your newly created apprenticeships, your expanded apprenticeship programs, and keeping just a simple count of the employers for whom you are engaged with for this project. We are seeing all of the newest H-1B grant projects where this is a required report as an augment report to the Q&Rs, to the quarterly narrative reports. The feds are expecting this report with Q&Rs for the newer grants. So we always encourage our customers to keep an eye on your real-time H-1B outcome measures report, and begin to include that with your Q&Rs as well, because the feds are really anticipating, they're really expecting this level of detail and transparency. So the projected information comes from the admin module. And again, as administrators, one of the things we expect you to do is to put in your goals. So each year you will have a goal for what you said you were going to do for your grant for each one of these goals. Again, it's as simple as pulling out your appendix for whomever wrote your grant and transcribe these numbers into these goals line items. You can make goals for totals or for special categories. You can set up goals for individual organizations, as for all of your partner agencies if you want to, or just in the grant total itself. It's completely up to you how you want to organize your goals, as long as you are tracking your goals with goals documents per year, years 1, 2, 3, and 4 for your grant. Then our report will be able to automatically and dynamically update your report based on the information that you've put in your goals and the actual data being put into the system. Baked into this application is an integrated employer management module, so that all of your employer outreach is able to be tracked within one application, including the apprenticeship work experience opportunities, as well as the apprenticeship opportunities themselves, and be able to keep track of the participant that was hired for the apprenticeship, which you can also see from the participant side, what employer they are working with. So both sides of the equation are able to be managed and viewed within one single application here. This is where we are also helping you keep track of your engagement dates, which automatically calculates B2 in your real-time performance, in your real-time performance outcome measures report. So this is how we are keeping track of your engagement date for all of your employers for whom you have all the documentation in place for your quality assurance management process. Of course, baked into this application, into this process, is self-registration. So we have, again, my demo site, just the ability for you to extend self-registration form for pre-populating some of the basic data. This is very heavily used across the vast majority of our customers. Many of them have attachments that are required for each of their potential participants, right? Their self-registrants, as well as disclaimers for, in this case, in my demo site, I have an equal opportunity statement. Yes, I've read it. Yes, I consent that my data can be used for this grant. We have some that expect a media release, consent and date. Lots of other things that you might want to include, or that you do include now through your other processes, that can be supported through self-registration. And that's really handy when we're talking about the numbers, the scope of these grants, to be able to have some of that data pre-filled in these forms. So I want to switch gears, away from the reports and the data entry of the application as you're seeing it here. And I want to show you what our importing process looks like, just so you can have that tangible experience about, oh yes, they have an import, and it's not magic. It's actually extremely real. So when I go here to my other tab, we have our component editors, and I'm in my H-1B application demo component editors, where you have the ability to create your own queries and data visualizations and dashboards. And it's here where we actually use the component editor for imports. If I click here, you can see I've got some imports that I've already created and run in test mode in my demo site. And this is what we use when if you come on board with AGS Prime and you have existing data, we would ask you to provide us with your most validated WIPS file. We already have an import job created to be able to take your data and have it automatically mapped to the fields, the column headers for your WIPS file, and be able to run that report. So just kind of give you an idea of what this looks like if I just open up this particular test import to give you a look at what our import process looks like, where we're doing mapping, where we have all of these target fields, just as a quick look-see. And this is how we go about utilizing an existing validated WIPS file and be able to quickly use a pre-built import routine to map the data and then import it into your blank application to then automatically create an application that has been pre-filled. And then what our import routine will do will automatically take that flat record and break it apart into a profile record, into a program record, into the services, assessments and trainings and credentials, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be able to take that one file and automatically break it apart into the requisite forms and fields in Prime so that you now have the start of a pre-populated case file for each of your participants that have been submitted to WIPS, and be able to launch your AGS Prime project with a pre-populated system with a validated WIPS data. So I think we've covered all the major tasks we set out to cover today in the demo side. I'm going to jump back to my presentation and just quickly, in the couple of minutes that I have remaining for my discussion anyway, just talk through briefly the implementation steps. It's very straightforward. If you decide that this is what you want to do, I'll ask you for your domain name, the name of your organization, typically the name of your school or organization or an acronym of some such, .agsprime.net. That's all we need. Get your site turned on and pre-configured. We'll schedule your application admin training. I do the application admin trainings. I'm one of the team members in the H-1B subject matter expert group. And so I will help you with your scheduling and with your application admin training. We'll get your WIPS file over to us, and we'll get that ready for import. And when that's done and we've finished your admin training, which is typically a 2, maybe 3 2-hour web sessions, much like this, your site, you'll be all trained in the application. Your site will be buffed and polished. You'll have a little homework at the end of your training sessions from me. Your data will be imported, your site will be pre-populated, and you'll be ready to go live. Pretty straightforward. And we've done this scores of times over the years, scores and scores of times over the years. So we have a pretty solid agenda and approach, tried and true approach for doing this. So any questions from anybody at this point? You can unmute yourselves or chat in if you have any questions. I'm looking at chat. Someone asked, typically how long does it take to get started once we decide? Great question. Implementation steps, pretty straightforward. Typically, we're going to go through your admin training, these 2 or 3 2-hour sessions over the course of 2 or 3 weeks. I like to give people a little time in between sessions to do your homework. Lots of business process discussions typically come up during that session, during that training session, or those training sessions rather. And so those can sometimes get extended, but it's usually really, really great conversations to kind of work through some things that maybe you just never had to think about before because you were using a process or a system that didn't bring out some of the same concepts and processes that you really want to think through when you're using a case management process like this. So generally a couple, 3 weeks on average between signing the order form, giving us your domain name, getting your data imported, going through the admin training, and being ready to start putting data in with your end users. So that's standard. depending upon the size and scope of your project. If it's again a single school or a national consortium, and I'll help you because we've done this lots of times. Talk through, best practices around a rollout or a ramp. Do we start with just a handful of schools or organizations? Or do you start with one and grow from there? And that's a pretty standard approach versus if you have a national project, do your first training with everybody all at once. That's probably not what I would recommend. So we'll talk through some of those implementation strategies depending upon, where you are in your grant overall and what's going to work best, for your cycle. Any other questions? You can unmute yourselves or type in the chat if anybody has any questions. Okay, well, I will take that silence as a no. There are no more questions. So thank you for your question. Thank you for your time again today. I very much appreciate it. And if you'd like to get in touch with me afterwards, if this was of interest, but you have some other questions, or you want to have a demo with others of your team members, that's very standard, very typical. I'm here to educate and to help. That's my role here at AGS. So there's no high pressure sales or anything like that. If this looks of interest and you want to hear a little bit more, ask me some private questions or just dig in deeper, just let me know. That's what I'm here for. Thank you very, very much. Have a wonderful day. Best of luck with your grants. If we can help, I'd love to. And have a wonderful rest of the summer. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.